Hey, you like cars? Gotta get the stretch on a bit before we start this podcast, but you know what we're doing here today. I'm back. It's Cameron Biggs, your host, the CarQuicks Podcast. You already know how we get down, so before I jump ahead of myself, like I just did, how about we get the clapper? You know what episode this is? 81. Cameron Biggs, your host, again, the CarQuicks Podcast. You're here for another week, here for another episode. We're here to talk about the automotive news, but first, how are y'all doing? Feeling well? Loved ones, children, significant others, goals, jobs, life, work, whatever it may be. Hopefully, it's going smooth. Mine is as well, too. Even with things that you got to fix and do and problems. I'm not saying problems don't happen. I'm saying as long as you're getting through them, I'm taking a sip of water. As long as you're getting through them, praying about things you need to accomplish, focusing on that, getting yourself aligned well, it's all going to be good. So let's get into what we're talking about in episode 81. We got some news. I'm going to jump right into, I do find it interesting. It's not really I do think it's one of those things going to fly under the radar because they haven't even advertised it as much as you would normally do when it comes to cars in this category, and that's Cadillac. So Cadillac announced that they have a new version of a V-Series vehicle. Now, usually, when a V-Series vehicle is coming up, that's very big news, right? That is something that everybody is talking about and wants to hear about and wants to see what they're doing. This time, it's on the Cadillac Lyriq, which is an electric vehicle, an electric SUV. It looks very wagony, but it's still an SUV. Now, this is probably when some people sign out. They're like, hey, man, next. I thought you were bringing out a wheel wagon. Now, I will say this. We do have a Blackwing. We got a manual, supercharged V8 performance sedan that's still available from Cadillac. So let's give them their props where they're due. Even if they have some electric ambitions that not every performance enthusiast is behind, they still are delivering on what we asked for. Now, this is a prime time. I will just segue a little bit. Prime time to reintroduce the wagon. We got BMW M5 wagon. We got the RS6 Avant. I'm not saying I can afford when they decide to do this, if they ever do, but I saw a rendering a long time ago on Instagram of somebody showing off a CTSV wagon, like currently a Blackwing, and it looked ridiculous. Now, clearly, if they did something like this, we're talking about 80,000, 90, 100. I ain't got that type of bread, but it would be nice to see it out there, and maybe 10 years from now, when it's on the used market, I can go and grab one of those. But I digress. Let's get back to what we're talking about. So the Lyriq-V is out, which is a V-Series version of their electric SUV, the Lyriq. Now, obviously, when it comes to like performance-related electric vehicles, I will say this. They never really hit as crazy as ICE-powered vehicles, ones with engines, combustion engines, because usually in that instance, if they were to make like when they made the V-Series of the Escalade, they had to put in a beefy motor. Like you really got to do something different. Electric cars is interesting because usually it's just them turning up the dial a bit, which usually it means they turn up the dial a bit more with what's already inside of the car, meaning we still got dual motors. Maybe sometimes they had a tri-motor setup, but usually it's like, here's the same structure we already had, and we're just kind of unlocking a new board. We put some DLC on the motor, on the electric engines, and now we can introduce some more horsepower. So what are we talking about? On this Lyriq, we have 615 horsepower, 650 foot-pounds of torque, 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. I know, this is kind of standard fare. Range is 285 miles, down from the 307 or more that the traditional Lyriq can get because you are giving up the range for performance, given with how fast the battery pack will dissipate or give out the energy in order to get to that 0 to 60. They didn't talk about top speed. I don't even think that that's a big deal, but let's just say 155. I mean, I don't even know why you're trying to top speed an SUV, but hey, some people will. And as far as the aesthetics, it does look a lot better than the standard Lyriq because they lowered it down. So it has upgraded suspension. It is lowered. The steering rack and the system is much faster than the standard Lyriq, and it has 22-inch wheels, which altogether give it this wagon type of stance. So I do like how this looks. If you're looking at the video, again, like, subscribe to the podcast, and then follow me on the YouTube. But I do like how it looks. It doesn't look bad. It's an aggressive look. You got upgraded brakes from Brembo because you do got to haul down a 5,980-pound SUV, which is heavy, but we've seen sedans that weigh that much now, so who knows what's going on. But all in all, it's basically aimed for, I want some more performance. I was looking at the Lyriq-EV in general, and I just want something that kind of matches the performance aesthetic of what I like. There are people that have black wings and have Escalade Vs and anything else that probably were looking at an electric vehicle to kind of put around town, and they're like, well, let me keep it up with the performance. I'm that person, okay? Let me be honest. If I just had the means to have black wings and I was going to buy another car and I was like, I want something to get around town. I want to just go to Target. I want to just go to the store, Costco, and do my grocery run. Maybe I don't want to jump in the manual CTSV wagon with the exhaust that I would inevitably put on there and whatever the performance mods I get my hands on, because I would. So maybe I just want to cruise in a way, but still got some power. I'm that buyer. I'm the guy that would show up there and say, give me the Lyriq-V, because why not? I'm going to buy one anyways. Might as well have the performance one. The base price starts at $79,990, which actually, I mean, I'm not saying that $80,000 isn't bad in the sense of that's not expensive, because it is, but I was surely thinking this was going to be $100,000, but clearly they're saving that for probably the Escalade IQ, the electric version of the Escalade, which they're probably going to make a V version of that because they have an Escalade V in general, which costs $100,000. So if they're going to keep this V series going on the EVs, and they're probably going to hit all the cars that they have and make a version of that for each one of those. So they got this coming out early 2025, which is kind of like where we're at right now. So I'm assuming first quarter, sometime around the spring. But they didn't, like I said, they announced this quietly. It arrived, and I was like, I didn't even realize that they were going to do this at this time. I knew they had talked about it, but now they showed it and they announced it. But as far as the interior goes, standard Lyriq fare. If you've never seen the interior, check out the pictures and the video. But stitching, V badging. They do have a 23-speaker AKG surround sound system with Dolby Atmos, which sounds like I should have a giant screen coming out the ceiling for a movie theater. But this is just a stereo. Big screen on the dashboard. You know, they do the curved OLED. I will give Cadillac their props there too, because I've had my say about the design of electric vehicles when it comes to their dashboards, and I'm always on the side of some of it's just a little lazy. Big screen on dashboard, big square rectangles. At least they curve theirs. At least theirs kind of tries to flow and targets the driver and the passenger, but has a kind of a softer flow to it. I still think that there are examples that show that you can integrate an electric vehicle, a digital dashboard, into better interior design, because I've seen it from companies like Rivian. I saw it in, I forgot which car it was. It was some SUV. I want to say Nissan. I don't think it was Nissan, but it was somebody, I think it was Hyundai with their new like Palisades or the new Ioniq N or something like that. One of those cars had an excellent looking interior with the same digital dash and all those things that we put in all the EVs now, but it still had some tactical feel, buttons and stuff. And that's what I always say about interiors now, that we're getting to the point where there's too much, just everything's on the screen. I don't like that portion of it. I still think that there is an element of design that should have some tactical buttons and feel to it. That's just my opinion on it. So Lyriq-V is coming out. If you're in the market, if you're looking for an EV, if you're looking for one to have more performance, and you were looking at the Cadillac range of electric vehicles, they got one for you now. And it comes in this cool little like matte black dark color. I'm sure the standard fare V series colors, reds, the blues, the whites, will be available as well. They didn't talk about any special edition, but I do want to talk about some driving modes they had. So launch mode, they said, is under a thing called Velocity Max mode, which is under Velocity Max, you get maximum horsepower, all 615. What do you get when it's not in there? I would probably imagine that there's a mode that has like Eco, Sport, Velocity Max. So like 400 horsepower, 500, 615. Then there's a competition mode, which allows you to configure the traction, the driving dynamics. So if you're trying to carve up some canyon roads, I don't know why you would want to, but hey, there is a place for all of it. Okay, I might want to carve up the roundabout or the U-turn in Texas. We got those onto the freeways. Just hit one of those in a little swift manner. I might want to do that. So I can change it in competition mode. I can change the dynamics, to driving, how it feels. They didn't get into much details on it from the articles I was reading, like from thedrive.com, where I like reading all the articles. But they didn't announce much more about that. But just so you know, if you wanted to know about the launch control, you're going to need launch control in order to get 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds, because that's the only time it's going to really give you everything, which is probably less traction control, all the power, all the torque. So first quarter 2025, if you're in the market, keep a lookout. Go to your local Cadillac dealership and ask them, put me on the list, because I'm guaranteeing ain't too many people in your way. This is a special niche group of people. Now, getting into some news that's kind of for us regulars, the pedestrians that aren't spending $80,000 on vehicles. Ram is back again. This time it's good news. Last week I talked about them, but it was kind of like bad news, kind of showing that they're kind of finding their way with what they're doing. But they are talking about a mid-size truck. So Ram trucks, they don't have a mid-size truck. You really don't think about it until you start hearing what they're talking about, and that is they want something that competes with Toyota Tacoma, let's say the Chevrolet Colorado. They don't have a mid-size truck, which is crazy. They should have one. So the current CEO, Stellantis, and all these people in this company and this organization, they are saying that there is a market because Toyota sells 200,000 Tacomas a year, which is nuts. And Ford has the Maverick, which is probably not far behind, but it's selling well. And when that came out, everybody said, thank you. A small mid-sized truck, because right now in the world of trucks, everything is like full size, HD, diesel. These trucks is mad expensive. I live in Texas, okay? I see trucks all day long. Massive trucks, lifted, all forms. I work with people that drive extremely nice trucks, Denali's and whatnot. So the truck game here is solidified. Everybody likes them. But there is a market for small, mid-sized trucks, because I would be one of those people where you want the ability to have a truck to do certain things, even tow certain things, but I don't need it to tow 10,000 pounds because I don't have a boat and I don't haul excavators and things like that. I'm not a, hot shot runner. So there are people that want mid-sized, smaller trucks that say, listen, I want the ability to put something in the bed, give me one that can hold a piece of plywood at least, or give me at least there by putting the little truck bed door down, and let me have the efficiency of like a smaller engine. I don't got to have a big V8. I don't want to fill up on diesel. I just want to keep it simple. So there is a big market for those mid-sized trucks. If the Tacoma doesn't tell you that from the world that they have created when it comes to overland, off-road, just everyday drivers, even the Ford Maverick, all the way down to the fact that they even have like a sport truck one called the Lobo. So it tells you the market is fresh and willing to purchase and participate if they produce the product. So Ram says in 2027, which I will say this, I'm assuming 2027 is model year 2027, because that seems kind of far out there. But like I said, they got a lot of things they got to fix. So they don't have time to just come busting out with a brand new mid-sized truck. And it needs to be compelling. It needs to have proper motors. It doesn't need to be complicated. The best thing that they could possibly do is just keep it tried and true. Find some motor you have, some standard V6. Maybe you have an inline four with a turbo on it that's compelling enough and reliable enough to put in here. I would argue start off with the V6 to just land properly within the market and offer something different. Just keep it simple. Don't got to be no electrified V6 and hybrid. I know that's the thing, but if you can find an efficient V6 motor that's sticking to this, you'll have won half the battle, which is just keeping something simple and to the point. That's all people want nowadays, just simple to the point. They don't want something that takes having to go to the dealership in order to work on and fix. They don't want something that has to have a massive warranty on it, so that if something does go wrong, you're not out of pocket thousands of dollars because the entire system isn't user-friendly. So they're working on that, and we'll see what comes out, what it looks like. I'm sure if you look at the current Ram trucks and what they look like, they're going to follow the same design element and lineage that Ram is doing with what their trucks look like now. Now, getting into some cool concept news. Audi showed off a wild off-road concept, and I guess I didn't even realize that they were just busy in the back room just having fun. But they showed off the Q6 E-Tron off-road, this like funky looking lifted off-road vehicle. Call it a sport activity vehicle. That used to be a term they used years ago. SAV. That was they didn't want to say SUV. They wanted to say SAV. Sport activity vehicle. This is kind of like in that range, but it's made for off-road and truly made for off-road. Even though it is an EV, everything in it was made under the idea of going over obstacles, trails, rocks. For instance, it has a feature, an option I was reading into. I never heard about it. I don't follow off-road. This could be old news to people that are deep into the off-road scene. I'm not. But they have something called portal axles. I know about solid axles. That's a standard thing. But portal axles on this concept they have allow it to have a wild amount of ground clearance, right? And I don't mean like you can't find trucks that are lifted that have just all the ground clearance in the world. I'm talking about from a standard build of an off-road vehicle. They said that with this setup, portal axles basically put gears onto each driven wheel that removes the need to have shafts and all these things hanging down from transfer cases in the transmission that do away with your ground clearance. It basically pushes everything up and out of the way. But one of the things that it does allow is that this concept, it said it had 100% grade capability. Now, because I'm not in the off-road scene, I had to go look up what they're talking about, because when I heard 100% grade, I was thinking 90 degrees. I'm like, well, that's not possible because gravity exists. But they said it's a 45-degree angle, which is still 45. I don't know if I'm showing 45 degrees on the video, but it's steep, right? And so what they're saying is with this portal axle setup and how they have built this little concept, it can just basically tackle those 45-degree angles with ease. Also, because this thing has an insane amount of torque. I tried to read deeper into whether this torque was a multiplied figure based on a smaller number, and I'll get to that in a second. It has 509 horsepower, electric motors, dual motor setup, but with this portal axles, I guess they multiply the torque based from a mechanical standpoint, like where the gears turn and how they're connected. It takes like a certain amount of torque, and it multiplies it, right? So they said with this entire setup, it has 9,883 foot-pounds of torque. Now, I went as far as I could find some information and be like, what are we talking about? That sounds like a freight train. Like, what do you mean? Now, I'm not saying that electric motor technology will not get to the point where they can come up with thousands of foot-pounds of torque in packages that are the size of a bowl of cereal, because I'm sure they're getting there. But this sounds absurd. So I'm going to put a grain of salt on that because I don't have all the information, but I'm assuming we're multiplying a certain number based on how the portal axles are operating on each driven wheel, because 9,000 foot-pounds of torque is absurd. Okay, like what are we talking about? You would press the gas and Earth would move and you would stand still. Okay, you would cause a category, you hit the Richter scale, 7.0. It'd be like, man, what were you thinking? Okay, but this is going to actually be used. This isn't just a dead concept, which I thought it was, just them practicing ideas that they're going to put into like EV cars, or they're going to put into maybe the Quattro series, because the concept was based on what Quattro means. They were like, we're going to, 9,000 foot-pounds of torque. You figured it out. Okay, that's Quattro. Okay, that's dos muchos Quattro. Okay, that's a lot of all-wheel driving. However, it will be used in ice racing. It's called FAT ice racing. That's going to be coming up in 2026, 2025, 26. They're going to be racing in that ice series. I actually went to the website to look it up because I've seen ice racing. I don't live in an environment or in a country that has ice racing that I know about that's easily accessible. But it would be a cool thing to see live and in person. But it's not here in this country that I know of. But I did go to check it out. It will be involved in ice racing. So you can see whether this amount of torque figures is on display somewhere and what it's doing. But soon enough, it will be out there. And it's wild. It's just a wild concept to see. But they're going to race it. They're definitely going to get out there and make something happen with it. Now, somebody else, I'm going to dive somewhere else real quick. Somebody else that's making an interesting shift. Remember Nissan and Honda are merging, and they have their own collaboration and what they're doing. And then in the midst of that merge, Mitsubishi came out of left field, and they're like, Mitsubishi might be involved too, because Nissan owns 24% of Mitsubishi, and I guess they're trying to figure out a way to make it make sense for them to come together. However, Mitsubishi bought back 10% of that ownership that Nissan had back last year sometime. So Mitsubishi has been on their own accord actively working to kind of go at this alone. Like they want to get back to being a sole company, I'm guessing, just all internal owners. Now Renault owns a lot of them too, so I don't know what that really means in the long run. But they said on this merger that Mitsubishi has come out and said, we're going to wait to see how this all plays out before we decide whether we're going to join in on this little party. Now, what I want to talk about is if Mitsubishi has the ability to go about it alone again. Mitsubishi lineup right now is literally being held together by the Outlander. And I know they have the Mirage. I think that was like listed as one of the last cars you can buy under 20,000. Yes, it's inexpensive. It's just not as high of a quality of a car that I would say to spend on if I could spend a few more $1,000s more and land in something that's a little bit more substantial. It's a good car for the price, I would assume, and for offering something that inexpensive in this market where everything is overly expensive when it comes to a car. So then they also have the Eclipse Cross, which is I barely see them, but I'm only one person. That doesn't mean anything. They could be selling those things hand over fist, and I just don't know. But I do know that the Outlander has done well for them, and I actually considered an Outlander at one point in time when I was looking at different cars you're going to get for the family. So I don't think it's a bad SUV, but I do think that that's not enough to keep them going. Now, from a car standpoint, I don't even know where they would begin. Of course, the enthusiast in me would say bring back the Evo. That's not a volume seller, okay? And if they brought one in, the thing that people would want would be some high-powered 4-cylinder that can handle all types of aftermarket turbos and boosts and all this performance things. Now, let's just say they felt it was necessary to get back into their rally racing roots, and they wanted to build an overly built, extremely powerful, strong 4-cylinder turbo sports sedan. Hey, knock yourselves out. Bring the Evo 11 out, whatever it may be. I'm ready. Now, realistically, they would have to come up with another compelling small sedan or a midsize sedan. Mainly, they have the one SUV. They might have to come up with another one. They might have to talk about EV efforts because it is a thing that they need to talk about. And they might have to introduce like a truck or something. Not that Mitsubishi hasn't done this before, because they have. They have been there at the realm of some of the greatest cars, some of the most beloved smalls, pickup trucks, sports cars, sedans. So they've done this. I just don't know what their bottom line is in order for them to afford to reintroduce any of this. Because you're talking about major upheaval, like developing a car, developing a motor, developing the marketing, developing the advertising, getting the people involved, getting people excited about the product, wanting to come in there and actually buy something from the dealerships. That's a lot. Like, it's not easy. I mean, you haven't seen a Galant in decades now, probably. Galant's dead. The Evo's been gone. The days of the B series, Mitsubishi's little small trucks that they're based off, I think the Mazda truck, those are gone. It's just not a lot happening. But it's not impossible. If they're determined enough to do it, I would hope that they would start off with something that just gets straight to the point, keeping it simple. I would say don't show up with an EV with the name of some other car that everybody would want you to build, and then you're like, we got the Galant EV. I'd be like, I mean, okay, that's fine, but you're better off just looking at what your competition's doing and doing that. Look at the Camry, look at the Honda Accord, copy it, make it look cooler, make it look a little bit more sporty. Just copy it. That's all you gotta do. Add your flair. Mitsubishi always had like the more sportier flair. The interiors look more sporty driven. They were aimed at maybe more of a car enthusiast, a driver enthusiast. Follow that. Get back to your history. Get back to your lineage and kind of drive that forward to be a differentiator in the market. Don't just copy Camry, I'm saying, and copy everything. You say like copy my Hummer, but change it. That's what I'm saying. So Mitsubishi is mulling it over. They're deciding if they're going to be the ones to join this merger or not, what it means for them later if they don't join the merger. I have no idea. They are surviving, though. Even with all these things happening, they are still around. And last year, the Outlander was what kept them alive. So they're doing enough to keep the doors and the lights on and the doors open. We'll see how it goes moving forward. Now, getting into that back into that sporty vibe I was just talking about a second ago. Shelby American, which is a weird way to say it. I keep saying Shelby America, but I believe it's called Shelby American. But regardless, the Shelby name is licensed in so many different places. But they brought back the GT350. They are the original people that made the GT350 back in 1965. And so they're bringing it back again. So they have a new GT350 got announced during the week. 810 horsepower. I already got some people's attention. Supercharged V8 based on the S650 Mustang that you can buy at the Ford dealership. It has livery that looks like Shelby, the racing stripes. They showed one in red. It looks dope, looks cool. Got 20-inch wheels. Those were kind of big, actually. I probably dropped those down to 19th if it was me personally. But it got 20-inch wheels. It has 6-speed manual, automatic. You can get it on. Borla exhaust is on it, so you get that loud sound. I don't know if it's raspy, but you get a sound that's obviously the supercharged V8. It's going to be loud. Only 562 are getting made. I didn't realize that they're going to limit this. I thought this was just like if you want to buy a Shelby GT350, you can buy one. But they're copying what they did in 1960s, which is they're only making 562. And an original GT350, that's how many they made. Upgraded sway bars, lowering springs, a little bit of an aggressive stance. In the pictures, I thought it was some like front splitters or lips, but this might all be factory. They do have a fixed wing on the back that is nice looking, a little bit aggressive. On the rear, gives it that sporty look. It has the insignia at the bottom to Shelby. It has the badging for it. So it has the aggressive look. It looks like a Shelby. It looks good. And there's another iteration. There is a GT350R coming, which is based on a version that they're making for racing. They're going to go back into the Trans Am racing sometime in 2026. And this particular one, now, I don't know if the street car has all this, because if it does, I'm going to be like, that's wild. But it has roll cage, Alcon brakes, carbon fiber tub interior, JRI suspension. I mean, that's all race grade. And they're making 36 examples for the street. Now, let's get to the price. The GT350 is based on a $61,000 vehicle, a Mustang GT. And maybe that might be a little bit more than a standard Mustang GT. You probably get one a little bit less. But when it's all said and done, when it looks like this red car I'm showing you, or this white one with blue stripes, it's $109,000. Now, that's a lot. Okay, that's a lot for the car. Is good. Let me not knock 810 horsepower. I'm sure it's a great fun time. That's a lot of horsepower, a lot of straight line ability, but I want to talk about the older GT350 that came out in 2015 to 2020 that Ford Performance made. See, that's what I was talking about, the licensing. See, Shelby America or American is the ones that own the Shelby name. Ford licensed it from them to make their version of what they wanted the GT350 to be. And at that time, it was a 526 horsepower, flat plane crank, high revving V8 that sounded wonderful. And accolades. People are like, one of the best driving cars. It was like the answer to Porsche's GT3s, without the price tag of a $200,000 car and all the engineering that goes into that. I'm just giving you a comparable example. So that's what that car was aimed at. It was like a scalpel. It was a driver's car. It was fast in a straight line. It wasn't the fastest thing. It definitely didn't have 810 horsepower. This new one has almost 300 more than the old one. And it was just made for a driver, and people loved it. And I kind of think that is lost on this new model. However, the CEO did say something. He said, for all the great things that the 350 was from 2015 to 2020, this is a quote from him, the one thing that in today's world that people wanted is, quite frankly, more than 526 horsepower. He said horses, but horsepower. And that was from the CEO of Shelby American, Gary Patterson. Now, he did speak to something that I have seen, I've talked about. If you listen to my podcast, I bring this up. I brought it up plenty of times, and that is the horsepower wars that we are definitely in. The horsepower wars have, on one hand, it's awesome. If you got the money, you there is no shortage of insanity that is available for you. We got 1,000 horsepower ZR1s. We got 800 horsepower Mustangs. We got all types of crazy Challengers and Chargers. We got all types of wild supercars, turbo, like the horsepower. If your aim is above 526 horsepower, the world's your oyster. Plenty of options. But if I was to just go against that a bit, to just kind of push back on that, it's that we lost drivers' cars in some balance. 810 horsepower is crazy. 810 horsepower in a rear-wheel drive Mustang to me is a straight line car. It's a highway runner. If you were not a driver, and I mean even the best drivers can still have a hard time harnessing 800 plus horsepower on a mountain road or a curvy road if you don't know what you're doing. If the tires are even halfway cold, it's over for you. And 20-inch wheels on a smaller sidewall of a tire, not as a meaty setup, it's a lot going on. You're going to be spinning a lot of tire. And so there is the people that enjoyed the previous GT350 that Ford made because it answered the call of, I want you to focus on the balance of the car. I don't know where 526 horsepower now became something that was just like, we need more. This ain't enough. We ain't cutting it. 526 ain't getting the job done, son. Now, for me, I drive a 300 horsepower hot hatch. So somebody can laugh at me and say, you don't even know what you're talking about. You ain't even driven nothing that fast. Well, I have been in plenty of cars that are much faster than that, but I still enjoy the balance of cars. To me, horsepower and speed is all relative. If you want a crazy horsepower, fast car, I know people that have GR Corollas that are complaining like, oh, I wish you could make like 500 to the wheel easy. And I'm like, yeah, you could have just bought another car. There's plenty of other cars that would have got you to that number. If that's your sole goal, you could have did it another direction. But I think we lose some of that balance with some of these new cars because the headlines are the numbers. And so if you release a car that has 400 horsepower, the first thing is going to be like, man, I mean, it's cool, but I mean, a Mustang going to blow the doors off. And it's like, if you're chasing to be the fastest person on the street, most likely you'll never be, honestly, because it's really just a money game, right? How much money do you have to spend? There's 2,000 horsepower Vipers running around, okay? So it's not a case of like, I want to be the fastest. I look at it as, what kind of balance can we build to have these drivers' cars where it's not just supercharged V8 with a lot of horsepower? Because getting back to that price tag, 109,000 to me seems a little bit egregious because I can build that for less. They took a S650 Mustang GT. I can go to Ford and get the most base GT. Don't give me no options. And I'm not saying that this version with the interior and the things that they add to it to give you that specialty of the Shelby American name, I do know that that has value and it holds weight and people will pay for it. That has something to say. Some people might argue it's just a badge, but the badge has history and it is what it is because they built it and the people will pay for it and they will stand by it. But if you're talking about price per dollar performance, I'm arguing that if you're really interested in getting an 810 horsepower Mustang, you can do it for under 109,000 easy. With ease. This is a standard Whipple off-the-shelf supercharger on top of the V8. It's not a built motor. They didn't take it apart and blueprint it and forge crank and heads and all this, because if they're going to go that far, it might have ended up as like 1,500 horsepower, something crazy like they have with their Super Snakes. Like they have a version called the Super Snake that's like over 1,000 horsepower that has different transmission coolers and radiators and all these other things it needs in order to harness that much power. But it gets back to that same thing I said before. It's just an increase of horsepower. But how does the car drive? And are we just talking about stoplight to stoplight highway runs? So if you have 109,000, I would say you can get a GT, get a Whipple supercharger. You want some extra wheels? These wheels look decent. The aftermarket got you tenfold on some fire looking wheels. You want the wing? You can do that. Suspension? We can do that. You want to go wide body? You want to go regular kit? I mean, we can make this thing look this good for under 109,000. So you really have to just want the history of the Shelby American name, maybe the badging that comes with it, the book list, the things that have with it, and kind of put it into like a collection of things that you've been doing. But if your whole goal is like, I want to get a Mustang to have 800 horsepower, then I'm going to say you can do that for a little under 109. And it might be a lot under. I didn't price it together, but just a rough look. I'm like, Yeah, I can do it for less, a lot less. Now, speaking about the GT350R, I will say I'll wait till I see that, because if it does have everything that the race version of that car had, now we're talking about something that's a little bit more special. However, if the standard GT350 is 109,000, best believe that the R is 150,000 or more. But it does have 830 horsepower, so it's not all lost. Like, you do get some more power in there. But listen, there's only 36 of them, so 150 might be, I might be being generous. It might be a lot more than that. Now, jumping back over to like some EV news real quick that I had read earlier today, and that is that the price tag for the new Model Y is out. Now, I showed you it last week, the redesign of the Model Y, and this is going to start at 61,000 for, like, it's like a launch first edition, something like that. I forgot the exact name they use, but basically for the Model Y, when it comes out here in America, the standard one starting off at 61,000, and I've already talked about what it had last week, but in case you're wondering about the price of it, that's what they have on there. Talking about something that I saw at SEMA Auto Show. Remember when Acura rolled out a Type S that had a bunch of factory performance parts from called HRC, but these are like really, really bespoke parts. These things looked amazing. We're talking about integrated roll cage, rear seat delete, carbon fiber buckets, all these things that they're building, kind of showing off what it would look like if Honda or Acura made a high performance version of their, or let's say a very exclusive version. Think of like a Ferrari has the XX versions of like the SF90 or the Enzo and things they had in the past. Take that idea and apply it to the Type S and the Type R. But recently, at a race event, I believe it was, he was speaking at Daytona, the Rolex 24 at Daytona. They were talking to the president of Honda Racing, Koji Watanabe, and he said, "Today I cannot tell the exact plan yet, but yes, we should create such kind of performance model together with HRC Racing Technologies. The American side started developing performance parts." So what he was talking to was somebody asked, "Hey, would you guys start making like even higher, more special edition Type Rs that had this bespoke HRC related performance parts on it?" And he said, "We don't have a plan yet, but if we were to do that, we're going to first start off with the Civic Type R and the Type S if we're going to do that." And just in general, if they were to do something like this, I welcome all of it. Anything that's talking about the sport compact world, sports car, driver's cars, anything interesting and bespoke, it's like do as much as we can until we can no longer. So I don't know what that would cost. It won't be cheap. Okay, just if a Civic Type R can be 50,000, if GR Corollas can get up to that much, high mid 40s, like nothing about a special edition version of a particular car at that price range is going to be cheap. We already have a version of the GR Corolla, the GR-MN version, which is potentially coming out this year, being announced, probably going to be like 60,000, 65, like the Morizo. So if they're making an HRC equipped Integra Type S, like the one I saw at SEMA, 70,000. I mean, that's just what it is. I mean, what you're paying for is the highest grade of engineering from the manufacturer on the car. GT3 RS, that type of version. I want what the factory can do at its highest level. So we'll see what it has to offer later, what comes up next. Now, before I wrap this up though, a couple little bit of news. It is the Houston Auto Show this week. As of this recording on Sunday, come Wednesday, I will be there at 8 a.m. sharp, covering the car show. There's a bunch of manufacturers came back, so it's not just a bunch of boats and RVs. I had that. We'll see. When I get there, I'll have a special edition podcast talking about the Houston Auto Show. I just want to kind of review it and give you my standards. I'll be there all day, so I'm gonna see everything, top to bottom. It won't be nothing I won't miss. And I'm excited for that because I love auto shows. I already talked about that. The GR Corolla I haven't done anything on it this week, but I do have a plan to have some other stuff that's coming in, so I can kind of record stuff kind of like every week. I have a little plan here, but there is something interesting happening. So the world of like aesthetics, I've always talked about me wanting to have certain looks and aggressive front lips, and there aren't that many available, but I liked what HKS did. And then this week, Sidebond showed off something. I'm like, oh snap. Party's getting started. We are starting to get some proper wings, proper aggressive front lips, diffusers. Things are shaping up. It's taking some time, but I do like to see the progression. like I said, I'm just waiting to see which one I go for, and then we're going to get this going. But I do appreciate what they have there. I have the idea of the GR podcast that I talked about. I'm talking to my friend Dave. We got to kind of plan that out with our own schedule. He got a family. I got a family. We both live in different parts of the city, which in this city, different parts of the city can be 45 minutes away. So we got to kind of plan out how we want to do this. But I definitely want to kind of finalize that and get that done. And I'm going to be here next week for another episode. And I got more events this year that I'm going to be at. And I'm going to keep on going. As I said, it's only episode 81. We are on our way to 100 and more and more. So, like I always say, do as you wish and do as you may. It's Cameron Biggs, your host. This is another episode of the CarQuicks Podcast. I'll see y'all next week. Peace.